Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Chof in Yevmot. Daf Kuf Chof. Again, we learned for 4 shlema for Elazar ben Reuma and Yosef ben Chaim Michal. And yesterday, at the end of the daf, we were discussing a machlokas between Rabbi Elazar and the Tanakama. Rabbi Elazar said that the Tanakama rather said that in the case where Reuben and Shimon were married to 2 women who were not sisters, but each of these women testified that their own husband died. So, of course, normally, if you're testifying about your husband died, you're believed and you can marry somebody else. But over here, the question was, there's a case of the Yavam. Each one had to make even apparently with the other one's husband. The other one's husband was dead according to their own wives, right? According to each one's wife, but they're not trusted to talk about their potential co-wife in this case, right? Because if either one of them would marry the other one's husband, so they'd be co-wives, right? If Reuben died and his wife married Shimon, and Shimon's already married to Shimon's wife, they'd be co-wives. So they're not believed, and therefore they're stuck. So the Mishnah said that Asura, each one is also because of the other one. Unless, of course, there were Adam that one died, or if one of them had children, but in case there were no children, then they would both be prohibited from marrying outside because maybe the husband's there, right? Maybe the other one's there, maybe the Yavam is alive, and you can't rely on the testimony of the Yavam's wife in each case. Okay, what happens though if there was other brothers, let's say Levi and Yehuda, and they married them? Well, if they married them, now what would you say? They married them, that means that they consider themselves they were Yevamos, right? The husband died with no children, so they married the other ones. But if they married the other ones and they weren't supposed to marry the other ones, then that would be Eishes Achshalav Malka Mitzvah. So the Mishnah says that Siyabmu Umesu HaYevamin Asur L'Slinas, they still can't get married to anybody else because maybe they weren't really supposed to get remarried to somebody else. Maybe in each case, maybe there was a child, or maybe you're supposed to believe them, and it's a Shachshalav Malka Mitzvah. So the Mishnah said, each one still should not get married. Why? Even though Levi and Yehuda are now dead, they married Levi and Yehuda and they're not dead, but maybe Reuben and Shimon are alive, even though Reuben's wife said he's dead and Shimon's wife said he's dead, but each one cannot be believed for the other one. So what do you do? So the Tanakama said that even if they got married to Levi and Yehuda, and Levi and Yehuda died, they still can't marry outside. They can't marry Lashuk because maybe Reuben and Shimon are alive, unless we know there's other evidence that they're dead. But Blazer says no. Since Hoel once they married the Yavamin, and then they're not also to marry anymore. You're not concerned that their husband, that Reuben and Shimon are alive, because once they married Levi and Yehuda, you can rest assured that they relied on the fact that Reuben and Shimon are actually dead, and now they can marry Lashuk. That was Machlok Rabbi Elazar and the Tanakama. So the Gemara debated at the end of the daf, does Rabbi Elazar hold that a tzara is believed, or since she herself, in each case, she herself married Levi and Yehuda, that means that she felt that there was a case of Yibam over here, that they were supposed to marry outside, marry the Yavamas, and therefore they believed them. They believed that the husbands are dead, and so that's the question: is it because the tzara, he disagrees with the Tanakama that we had before, and a co-wife is believed on the other one, or is it because since she herself got married to somebody else, right? How could she? In other words, Reuben's wife says that he died, right? But Shimon can't believe her, right? But if Reuben's wife goes and marries Levi, that's pretty strong evidence that her husband is dead. Otherwise, how could she marry her husband's brother? So Rabbi Elazar says, well, once she married her husband's brother, it's very clear that her husband's dead, and Shimon can rely on that, and vice versa, right? That when Shimon's wife married Yehuda, so Reuben's wife can rely on that Shimon's really dead. That's what Rabbi Elazar says, and therefore, if Levi and Yehuda are dead, you can assume all the brothers are dead and they're free to marry. However, the question is it because, does Rabbi Elazar say that because he holds that a co-wife is believed in general, or only in this case because since Reuben's wife married Levi, so that's pretty strong. You don't have to believe. Normally, let's say you wouldn't believe Reuben's wife that Reuben is dead. Shimon's wife can't believe her, right? But over here, Reuben's wife went herself and got married to Levi. How could she marry Levi unless Reuben's really dead? Then we believe her because she put herself at risk. Let's assume that's the case. So is it because she put herself at risk? Let's call that, or because no, he disagrees with the general idea that a tzara is believed about the co-wife. You believe her in this case. That was the question that the Gemara raised. So the Gemara says that the bottom, let's just repeat that. Boy, Rav, 4 lines from the bottom of yesterday's stop. Boy, Rav, my time Rav Lazim, that tzara could testify about her co-wife. Odilma, and this is like a tzara because they're falling even they're both falling even together. Odilma, Mishum Dilo Makalta Nafsha, she's not going to ruin herself, right? The reason what Lazim says he's believed over here is because Reuben's wife went and married Levi. How could she marry Levi if her husband's not really dead? You say you don't believe her. You believe her as far as herself is concerned, but Shimon's wife can't believe her. Yeah, but if she went and married, if Reuben's wife went and married Levi, that shows that she's really telling the truth, right? So she's not going to ruin herself. The mind of Kamina, the question is now Kamina big Linsubi Litzar at the top of Kochav, the Linsubi Litzar Makamidida. Would you marry off the Tsar before she herself? In other words, when she herself put herself at risk and married somebody else, that's a sign her husband's really dead. But let's say she didn't marry somebody else off. She just said, oh, my husband's dead. Reuben's wife said, my husband's dead. Can Shimon's wife now rely on that and marry Lishuk? Let's say there's only Reuben and Shimon. Shimon's wife knows he's dead. And Reuben's wife says that Reuben's dead. Is she believed? Does Shimon's wife believe Reuben's wife? Even if Reuben's wife didn't go and marry Levi, another brother? Before her. If you say that a co-wife is believed about her other co-wife, and I forgot even though she didn't get remarried, even though Reuben's wife didn't marry Levi, you still wouldn't marry her off Tzara. I'm sorry, you would marry. I forgot the law said even though Reuben's wife did not marry Levi, you can still marry off the Tzara. Shimon's wife could get married. Why? Because we believe her. If the reason is because she wouldn't ruin herself, how do we know she's telling the truth? Reuben's wife claims that Reuben's dead, right? But Shimon's wife isn't allowed to believe her unless Reuben's wife goes and marries somebody else, marries Reuben's brother Reuben's brother Levi based on her own testimony. Then you believe her. If she gets married herself, then Matzabina, let's say you marry after Tzara. If she doesn't marry. If she doesn't get married herself, in other words, if she doesn't put herself at risk, we don't believe her. That's the question. When Rav Lazar says that if they marry Levi and Yehuda and then Levi and Yehuda die, then they're free to marry the Shuk, and you don't assume maybe Reuben and Shimon are still alive anymore, like the Tanakama. Tanakama says they still can't get married because maybe as far as Reuben's concerned, maybe as far as Shimon's wife is concerned, maybe Reuben's alive. How do we know Reuben's dead? Because Reuben's wife said so. Well, we don't believe her. That's the Tanakama. Rav Lazar says, no, it's okay. Now, once they marry Levi and Yehuda, it's okay. Why? Is it because Reuben, he disagrees with the whole concept and he says that Sarah is believed? So even if Reuben's wife did not marry Levi, still Shimon's wife is free to marry? Or do you say, no, it's only because Reuben's wife went herself and married Levi, indicating that her husband's for sure dead, then you believe her. So if she married Levi, then it's okay for Shimon's wife to marry out, but otherwise not. That's the question. Tashma, try to bring Blazer says, since they're mutter, it says, since they're mutter, right? Since they're mutter, since they married Levi and Yehuda, they're free to marry. If you say the reason is because she wouldn't ruin herself, meaning she put herself at risk, that makes sense. If she married, we marry off the tzara also based on that. If it's because a tzara could give testimony about her co-wife, so what did you say? Since she married the Yevamah, and since Lazar's words and the Mishnah words, since Reuben's wife married Levi, so we let Shimon's wife also go marry out now. Why? Because Reuben's wife put herself at risk. If the reason is because she put herself at risk, fine. If the reason is simply because she's believed, so even if she didn't get married, if you say that Reuben's wife is believed for Shimon's wife and Shimon's wife is believed for Reuben's wife, what do you need this business if she got married to Levi? Even if she didn't marry Levi, also you believe her. Elishma Minat time must be the time of Rav Lazar Mishum the Insab because since she married herself off to Levi, meaning Reuben's wife put herself at risk and showed that her husband's really dead, oh, that's the reason. Below Makal Konaf, she's not going to ruin herself. So that's L'chora proof. It's only because she got married. Says the Gemara, no, it's no proof. It could very well be the Rebbe Elazar holds that a tzara is believed to testify about her co-wife. Rebbe Elazar L'Divreim Kamerlu, he was simply talking to the rabbis, to the Chacham who disagreed. L'Didi, Rebbe Elazar could say, tzara midal chaveret. I disagree with you about the general idea. We talked before about a mother-in-law cannot testify about a daughter-in-law, but a tzara could be is believed about the chaver. That's what could be Rebbe Elazar Shita. Even though Reuben's wife did not marry Levi, Shimon's wife can still get married. But according to you, if Reuben's wife went ahead and married Levi, another brother, that's clear proof that Reuben is actually dead. And then you should be motive there that if Levi now and Yehuda died, that Shimon's wife is free to marry anybody. She's not going to ruin herself. Or Rabbanan say no. Thomas Nafshi and Plishtim. It could be that Reuben's wife is lying when she said her husband's dead. She married Levi. So she says, I don't care. I'll be over in Isser just to ruin Shimon's wife too. So let her also make a mistake. Let her do the same thing. She could be such a Rashanta that that's what could happen. But Thomas Nafshi and Plishtim who took up that, she simply says, I don't mind getting ruined myself as long as I ruin her too. That's people can be some. Pardon? The wife for herself. Right, we believe her number one, but we don't believe her as far as number two is concerned, right? So the question of it is yes, but if Reuben's wife put herself at risk by marrying somebody else, by marrying Levi, and put herself, Rav Elazar says you can. Rav Elazar says she put herself at risk, then for sure. But the question is it only because she put herself at risk, or even if she didn't put herself at risk? Maybe Rav Elazar disagrees with the whole concept, and he says that a tzara, a co-wife, is believed. That's what we're trying to debate. So we said it must be only because she put herself at risk. Says no. Maybe Rav Elazar holds, I hold that you believed anyway. But you rabbis at least be motive to me when she put herself at risk that Reuben's wife must be telling the truth, and therefore allow Shimon's wife to marry anybody. And the rabbi said, no, it doesn't mean anything that she put herself at risk. Maybe she says, I don't care if I'm over at Isser and I'll marry my brother-in-law when I'm not supposed to. This way I can ruin Shimon's wife too. That's how much the hatred can exist. So he's still looking for proof. Tashma, another proof. We had this case before. A woman went overseas with her husband, and she comes and tells us, Meis Bali, my husband's dead. Tina says she can get married, but take to Ksuba, but Sarasa Asura. Okay, so she says, my husband died, we were overseas. She's entitled to get remarried, and she gets Ksuba. But the Tsara is not believed. Tsara Asura. Rav Elazar, we didn't have Rav Elazar the other day, it wasn't mentioned the other day, but here it's mentioned, maybe this is a brisa. The first part is just like a mission that we had. Rav Elazar Mahal B'Hutrahi puts her Sarasa. Since she's mutter to get married, the Tsara is also believed, right? So what do you see? Since she's believed, you believe her for the Tsara too. It sounds like she's believed about her Tsara, regardless of whether she was married or not. No, a Mahal B'Hutra B'Nissus. Put that word in. Since she was mutter and she got married, when is you believe for the Tsara? Maybe when do you believe her as far as the Tsara is concerned? And she says, my husband's dead. She's believed for herself, but can the Tsara also get remarried? Only if the woman who reported the death, the number one who was with her husband, got remarried. If she got remarried, that's different because then she showed that her husband's really dead. That's how you can learn it. So therefore, maybe it's only, again, if she put herself at risk, only then would she believe for the Tsara.
It's hard to understand. They believe, if number one is believed.
For herself.
Yeah, but that means that her husband was dead. That means that Sarah's husband was dead too.
That's correct. That's correct. I was saying, but for the Tsara, we can't believe. For herself, the rabbi said we allow it. Don't forget, there's no witnesses over here. There's no two Adam. There's no two Adam who said that he's dead. We have no solid proof that she's dead. We're relying for herself. For herself, the rabbi said, you know what, Mishum Iguna Kila Rabbanim. We don't want her to be an Iguna. We're makel for her. But she's not believed for anybody else. That doesn't sound fair. Well, that's how it is, because we're afraid that she's just saying that to ruin the other one. Right? What is it? A woman as a co-wife, she'd like nothing better for the co-wife to disappear. So she comes home from a trip and she says, oh, my husband's dead. Oh yeah, your husband's dead. Good, we can get remarried. She goes and gets remarried and becomes effectively an adulteress, the co-wife. And the other one says, oh, now I got my husband to myself, right? That's the svara over here. So she might be lying. So we say over here also, we can't prove either way. We want to prove that either it's only because she put herself at risk or because she didn't put herself at risk. Maybe it's because she put herself at risk. Only then is she believed, but not that in general a co-wife is believed, not another one. But we say, wait a minute. Why do you say you say here no? But that when again in a simple case where a man has two wives, 1 and 2, and he went overseas with number 1, and she comes back and says that he's dead, right? She can get remarried. Okay. What about the co-wife? Oh, Rabbi Elazar says the co-wife can get married if number 1 already got remarried too. If number 1 got remarried, right? Maybe that's the shot. Only not that in general a co-wife is believed about a co-wife, about the other co-wife. Rabbi Elazar maybe agrees with the Chum, the co-wife's not believed. But if number 1 remarried, so then you could believe her, right? If she married, then she put herself at risk. Says the Gemara, so what if she remarried? Maybe while they were overseas, they had a fight. The husband and number 1 had a fight. He gave her a get. And he divorced her. She put it in her pocket, didn't show it to anybody. And she comes home and says, my husband's dead. We're free to marry. We're both free to marry. Now, number 1 is free to marry because she has a get. But number 2 is not free to marry because the guy's still alive. So maybe that's what happened. How do you believe her even if number 1 got remarried? Listen to this. So now we say, oh, if number 1 got remarried, she put herself at risk. How do you believe her even if she got remarried? Maybe she has a get. And she's trying to ruin the other one, turn the other one into adulteress, conniving people. She's just trying to ruin the other one. She herself can get remarried because she has a get, right? Maybe it's an Eden Nasal Yisrael. You're right. If she married a Yisrael, you have to be concerned about that. Even according to Rabbi Elazar, maybe she can't get remarried. You can't believe her, even because she didn't really put herself at risk. Maybe she has a get. If she married a Kohen, then she can't claim that she has a get because maybe the husband's going to show up now. Because what's our concern? That the husband gave her a get, right? And the husband gave her a get so she can get remarried, but she's trying to ruin number 2, trying to injure number 2. But if number 1 now marries a Kohen and the husband comes home, says, what's going on over here? And they say, oh, you divorced her. Where's the get? She'll have to leave her new husband the Kohen. So she doesn't want to ruin herself. The whole concept is saying is Rabbi Elazar says she's not going to put herself at risk. But here she would put herself at risk. So if she marries a Yisrael, you're right. If number 1 says my husband's dead and she gets married to Yisrael, number 2 cannot get married even according to Rabbi Elazar because maybe she was really divorced and that's why she got married and she's trying to ruin number 2. But if she married a Kohen, then it'll come out and she'll have to leave her husband too. So she put herself at risk.
She has to leave and she wants to stay with the Kohen.
No, he has to divorce her then. The Kohen's obligated to divorce her. The rabbis encourage her. She's married to a Kohen. Kohen's not allowed to stay married to a Grusha. The Kedushin's chal and she's a get and all that, but he has to divorce her. So if she married a Kohen, then then you can rest assured that according to Rabbi Elazar, that she's telling the truth. According to Chum say no, she would do that. Nothing means anything. You can't believe her at all. But according to Rabbi Elazar, he says if she put herself at risk, here she put herself at risk because she's married to a Kohen. She's not lying about the get, so she's telling the truth, and her husband really is dead. And number 2 can get remarried. Now, when they testify about somebody dying, whoever it is, whether it's the wife or it's Adam who really testify, we're going to talk about what more medical stuff. What does it look like? How do they testify? Mishnah says, when they testify that somebody's dead, they have to have seen the face. That means parts upon that's the face with the nose. They always show when they try to show you a picture of somebody and to hide his identification, they put a black line like over the nose, and you really can't tell the face, right? You need to see the whole face with the nose. Even though there are simanim, even though there are identification marks on his body, maybe he had a tattoo, maybe there was a tattoo, maybe there was a scar or something, or a caleb, or on his garments, that doesn't mean anything, right? You need to see the face. You can't testify that he's dead until you actually saw him die. There was no pulse, he was dead. Even if they saw him cut up, his arteries were slashed, or he was crucified, or v'chayochelasbo, or animals are devouring him, that's no proof that he's dead. He might have survived. We'll talk about this. Also, a person decomposes after several days, right? So therefore, if you didn't see it within 3 days, you have to know it was within 3 days. If you see it within 3 days and you saw him, then you can identify that he's dead. After 3 days, the body decomposes, it bloats, etc., and you can't testify. It all depends on the person, on the place, the climate, the hours. So we're going to talk about, is Rabbi Yehuda Makel or Machmer? In other words, he says, the Tanna Kama says only until 3 days. Rabbi Yehuda seems to say, even if it was more, sometimes even after 5 days, if the body was preserved, they have bodies that were frozen or something like that, bodies preserved, you can even identify it later on. So it depends on the circumstances, the climate, the time, etc. We'll talk about it more. Tarabanan. He saw the forehead, but you didn't see the face, or parts of Panim below Padachas, where you saw the face without the forehead. You need to see those. You can't testify that he's dead. You have to be able to see the forehead, the face, and the nose. Otherwise, you can't testify that he's dead. So it looks like him, but it's not really him. The recognition of their face is what testified against him. You got to be able to see the face. Abba ben Marsa, to Abba ben Yumi, story that that same fellow, Abba was his name. He owed money to the exilarch's house. He owed money to them. Isaac here, he bought some wax. Dafik Blaise smeared some wax on a shmata. Dafik Bafuse, and he rubbed it on his forehead. Chalav Kamayon, he passed in front of them below Bashkur. They didn't recognize him. They didn't. In other words, if you disguise yourself even with a little something on your forehead or your face, you won't be recognizable, because that's the key. The key is you have to be able to see the entire face, including the nose, including the forehead. So he said, even though there are simanim on the body, a scar, a tattoo, or something of that sort, that's not good enough. You got to be able to see the face. The name of the siman of the Raisa is the concept of identification marks, not minat Torah. Why aren't identification marks okay? For a minute, we learned matzah kosher b'kis v'raniki b'tabaz. Let's say a man was bringing a get. Man was bringing a get from overseas or from wherever, and he was the shliach. He was giving him a get, and he lost the get. He lost it. A few days later, he found it. It was tied to his purse or to his travel case or to his ring. They used to have rings, like seal rings that that you could the seal on. It was tied to that. It's okay. Oshanim to Ben Caleb, or he found it among his furniture. I feel his mamruva, even after a long time, it's kosher. He can assume. Now here we're being matzah and Eishes Ish, right? He's giving a get. She's a married woman. How do you know it's the right get? Maybe it's somebody else's get with the same names. You have to, it has to be written l'shma. The get has to be written for them, and it's okay because there was a simon. He had it attached to his own ring or his own wallet or whatever. That's okay. So you see, a simon is the right. So Rabbi Lokash or Blazer Ben Nave or Rabban. It's machlokas. Tanya Eimegnal Shuma. In other words, there's a machlokas whether simanim are d'oraisa or not. Apparently, as we'll see. You can't testify about a mole, right? You can't say, well, this guy had a mole. You do give testimony. I said, the guy had a mole there. That's proof that it's him. One holds it's the Araisa, so you could give a simon based on that. One holds it's Rabbanan. Our Mishnah holds apparently that it's only Drabanan, right? That it's only simon is only Drabanan, so you can't rely on that. The other one holds no simon as Araisa. No, that's no proof. Everybody could hold that simon or minatoras. We had the pasuk, a correspondent, or it's not based on a correspondent. Correspondent is seeing the face. Simonim's the rice is based on the pasuk says v'chein tasela simla. So what's the point of simla? To show you, because people have a simon on that. So it shows you that simon is the raisa. Why does it mention that? To show that things that have a simon, you can return items based on a simon. I found something in the street, you give a simon, I return it to you. Simon is the raisa. So everybody could hold that. But the question is that maybe people born at the same time, Ben Gil is a person born under the same constellation, they have a similar tendency to get a mole in that spot. That you do find moles in the same kind of people in the same places. Presumably, Marsavar ain't a Mitsuya Ben Gil, it's not Mitsuya. So that could be what it's talking about over there. You see the machlokas from Elazar ben Mava and the Chachamim is, can you give testimony based on a mole? No, the question there is everybody calls someone as the rice, but this is not a good simon because many people born under the same constellation will have a similar mole. Therefore, it's not a good simon. It's not an ID mark. Can you give an ID and say the guy had a hand? Everybody has a hand. That's not a simon. Simon means something that identifies him. Or it could be that the machlokus here is that everybody calls up simon as a raisa, but the question over here is a simon changes after death? After death, the skin can change and body decomposes. Then a mole does change lachar misa, and therefore you can't testify based on that. Marsavar, Einasulish doesn't change lachar misa; it stays the same. Some say everybody holds the simanim is only drabanan. This we still learn of a pasuk of a chain tasim also. That could be just an asmachta, but it's only a drabanan. The question over here is a mole a good distinct simon? Is it a good distinct ID mark or not? If the marsav is simon mubak, one says it is simon, you can testify based on that. Marsav la simon, that was a question about the moles. So the Gemara says, okay, so if it's only Rabbanan, we understand our Mishnah. Why don't you believe him? Why don't you say he had a scar or he had he had a tattoo or some other mark on his body? That's only Rabbanan. But the Ulahachlish and Damarava, Simon is a rice. If Simon is a rice, why can't you testify that this guy is dead based on a scar? Why do you have to see his whole face? So Tani Afishesh Simon and Begufo Ubekelev. Right? So even though there's simanim, you don't testify about that. Why not simanim is the rice? The Gemara says the simanim we're talking about in Mishnah are not good simanim. Why? When he says simanim begufos, it means gufo de orach begos. You're right. It could very well be that a scar would be a good mark, a permanent scar. But here when he says a siman on his body, he's talking about he was tall or short. Is that a good siman? Is Jim dead? Well, we saw a tall guy and Jim is tall, so it must be him. Not much of a siman. Caleb, the chashin l'shela. His garments is because maybe, how do you know it's his clothes? Maybe somebody else borrowed his clothes. That's not a simon. Oh, those were his clothes. I recognize that's his uniform. Maybe somebody who sent him. If you're worried about borrowing, so why in another case in Bamatzida we learned that how do we return a chamor? Question is donkeys. They all look alike, the donkeys. But you can return it with the simon of a saddle. I recognize the saddle. That's the simon that he has. Why do you return that? Maybe the saddle was borrowed. How do you know that? Maybe you lent it to somebody else and it's not his donkey. It says Lo Shalin Shich, when people don't lend out saddles, the maskele lechamra, because it makes a sore on the donkeys. In other words, the saddle, once it's used to sitting on a particular donkey, it develops the shape of the donkey's back, and then people don't use that saddle on another donkey because it'll make a sore. So people don't lend those out. So how do we find, what about the case of the get? You said before, if a man lost the get and then he found it attached to his saddlebag or his purse or his tabaz, how do you return that? Maybe those are borrowed also. The answer is tabaz chayshel. If people don't lend out their ring, it's like a seal ring, because people are afraid that somebody will use it and forge a document based on that, right? Rashi says the guy will take the ring and sign it and go to the forger will take it to the wife of the owner and say, look, your husband told me to give you to hand over all your money from the safe to me, so he'll forge it. People don't lend out their purse, their wallets, because it's like superstitious. It's like I'm giving him my mazel. B-boy same, or you could say or you could say the reason why the garments are not a good simon is not because they're lent out, and then we have to explain why these other garments aren't lent out. Simply because also, what was the simon on the garments? They were white or they were red. That's not much of a simon. A lot of people have white or red garments, so it's not much of a simon. So could very well be that simon is the raisa, but over here we're speaking about where you didn't have really good simonim. But if you had good simonim, like the man had a tattoo today, probably wouldn't be much of a simon because they all have tattoos, right? But if you had a particular scar, then maybe it would be acceptable. The Mishnah says, even if you saw him cut up, his arteries were cut up, you can't testify that he's dead. He may not be dead yet. You're saying that a person who was cut up, he can live. I mean, after all, you're saying that the guy died. Say maybe he wasn't dead then. He was dead 10 minutes later. No, maybe he survived. For a minute, how could a person like that live? For many, person is not tame, until he dies. Even if he's cut up, even if he's dying, right? you can't testify he's dead. Maybe he survived. It's not she can't live. You're saying over here that maybe the man will, even if you saw him cut up, don't testify that he's dead. Maybe he lived. It's mashma over there that a person's not tamei until he dies, but he is going to die. He can't live. So Abaya's answer is it depends on machlokas. Our Mishnah goes like Shimon Elazar, who says that a person like that can live, even if it's cut up, he can live. And Rabbanan say he can't. The time you can testify of a person who was cut up, even though not about a person who was crucified. A crucified, maybe he's alive, but if he's cut up and his vein, his arteries were cut, you could testify that he's dead. Shimon Elazar says no. Because they could be cauterized and he could live. Right? They could contract or cauterize them and he lived. It says, can you say our Mishnah goes like Mishnah Elazar, but Tani Seifa, we learn in the Seifa, in the next Mishnah we'll learn. There was a story in Asia, a man was lowered into the sea. He was lowered into the sea on a rope. And when they lifted up the rope, all that came out was his leg. Said, if it was cut off from above the knee, in other words, you got the whole foot above the knee, he's definitely dead. Say she's permitted to get remarried because he's definitely dead. If it was cut below the knee, in other words, the part that when he was amputated was below the knee, maybe he swam somewhere else. We're going to talk about that. So you can't see the end of the water. Maybe he swam to another place and he survived. If he was above the knee, if he was cut above the knee, then he's definitely dead. So what do you see over here? According to Rav Shimon Elazar says, you can't. Our Mishnah says that he can survive, but over there it says that if it's cut above the knee, he can't survive. So how can you say Mishnah goes like Rav Shimon Elazar? No, shiny Maya the Marza Maka. It's different if he was lost in the ocean because the water will irritate the wound. In other words, if he's just hurt on land, right? If he's cut up, he can survive. He can cauterize the wound. But if he was in the ocean, then if he had an open wound, it would irritate it more, and that's why Shimon Elazar says he was dead there. I saw an Arab, he took a sword, and he slashed his camel. He didn't even stop braying before he was dead. In other words, he was dead almost immediately. So you see over here that they don't survive if once its arteries were cut. He was a very weak camel. He was half dead anyway, and that's why he died. But according to Shimon Elazar, just the fact that he's cut up doesn't mean anything because the wound can contract or cauterize, and it'd be okay. And the ocean is different because in the ocean itself, maybe the salt water, whatever, it makes it worse. So the question over here is, if a person is cut up, can he survive or not? Our Mishnah says he could survive. We have an opinion that he can't survive, and therefore you could testify that he's dead. So he said, our Mishnah of Shimon Elazar, over there speaking to Rabbanan. Rava gives a different answer. Amar, the Sakim Melubenes v'Devrei. Our Mishnah is speaking about, you're right, normally if a person has his arteries cut, he can't live. But our Mishnah is speaking about where he was cut with a hot knife, and the hot knife itself cauterized the wound. That's what happened. The Sakim Melubenes, like a white, red hot knife, and everybody agrees there that he can live. So it is possible to be cut and survive. Okay, but still we know that's pretty rare. The Mishnah says, or if an animal's devouring him, you could still say that he could survive. That's only if he's not the animal is not devouring, let's say, a vital organ, right? But if he's but if an animal is eating up his vital organ, he's eating up his heart there, or his trachea, whatever, his lungs, he's dead. You can assume that. Says, let's say a man, somebody could, just like we talked about shechita of an animal, the shechita of a man, his trachea and esophagus were both severed, or mostly severed. Shachat bo shnayim o rov shnayim, and he ran away. Somebody cut him. He was in a sword fight, and they cut him across his neck, and they severed both vital organs there, and he ran away. Meaning, you can testify that he's dead. he might have run away, but he's not going to get very far. He's going to be dead. You can testify that his wife can get remarried. Let's say that happened. A man had his vital organ, his esophagus and paper were both mostly severed, and he was laying there, Varamas, and he hinted and he said, quick, write a get for my wife so she shouldn't have to fall Yibam or Chalitza. You can give it assuming that he's alive. The answer is Chayu with Sophamomas. He's alive now. You better give the get right away. Because if you only gave it after he's dead, then it's too late. But he's right now, but he's going to die. She can testify now, how long can a man live like that? If his vital organs are severed, he's not going to live very long, maybe a few hours or not even that. But you can testify the next day that he's dead, but he's alive at that point. If he's wanting to give his wife a get right there, or maybe like we learned yesterday, he appointed the other guy a shliach to accept the get for her. And in that case, if he knew that she didn't want to marry his brother, then maybe it would be a schus for her. Wait a minute, if that's the case, if you're saying that if you severed somebody's vital organs, he's definitely considered dead. He might not be dead now, but he's going to be dead in a few hours. So if that's the case, if he did it by accident, let's say by accident, you were chopping a tree and your axe went and severed the guy's neck, and you should go into Galus, right? You killed him b'shogeg, right? Why do we learn that you don't go into Galus, but you did kill him? If you did it by accident, you should go into Galus. That's different. So we're afraid that over there, it wasn't his action alone that killed him. You're right. You go into Galus if you killed him b'shogeg, but it could be over there that it was windy and the wind aggravated the wound. In other words, had it not been so windy, he might have survived or might have survived longer. But over here, maybe the wind had an effect because you opened the wound, and then the wind came in and caused him to die. Or maybe the man was so upset and he was struggling and convulsing that he hastened his own death. Because if you hasten the death, that means he didn't just die based on the person who axed him, but rather was his own action. What's the difference if the reason is because of the wind, or the reason because of himself, because of the wounded person himself hastening his death? The shachtim are based on the shayshel upirch. Let's say the person who hit him with the axe holder. It was done in a room. There was no wind. It was a house that was totally enclosed, like you say, a house that was made out of marble. There were no windows there, so there was no wind. But he was convulsing. If the reason is convulsing, that's why he doesn't go into Galus. Fine. But if there was no wind and he didn't convulse, then in a chanami, then the person the axe holder would go into Galus because he killed him. Or let's say it was outside and he didn't convulse, so it was the wind that did it. So again, if you hold against the wind, if you hold against the wind, so when there's a wind, then you don't go into Galus, but otherwise you would go into Galus. And if the reason is because he convulsed, if he didn't convulse, and there was no wind, then you would go into Galus based on that. So it depends what your reasoning is. Rashi says in the third line, based on the second line, Shein Shem Ruach, Lishna du Ruach B'Vaso, he would go into Galus. He died because himself. And as if the reason is that you don't go into Galus is because you didn't really do it because the wind did it. There's wind. If there's no wind and he dies, then it's your fault. You go into Galus. If the reason is because of convulsing, right? So he was outside and he didn't convulse. He didn't convulse and he died, then you would go into Galus. It's only if he convulsed himself means he hastened his own death. Rabbi Yehuda said, we said in the Mishnah that all testimony, you have to see his face, etc. We said if you hold simanim is d'oraisa, then it could very well be if there was a good siman, you could testify based on that, a particular scar or something of that sort. But you can only testify within 3 days of death. If you say you came across the body and it was clearly, many days later or weeks later, you can't say I saw him because maybe it looks different now that the body has been decomposed. So Rabbi Yehuda says it all depends. Then you don't say 3 days. It depends on the circumstances, the climate, what was going on over there. So the Gemara is like this. Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. Rabbi Yehuda says it all depends. He says Rabbi Yehuda says at the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, look, not all people, not all places, not all hours, not all the same. There may be difference of day or night. Is he going lakula when he says this, polig? And he's saying, no, sometimes you can even testify even after 3 days. Or lechumra polig, or is he saying lechumra and saying sometimes you don't even have 3 days? Right? That's the question over here. So Tashma, do have a story. The Tava Bakami, man drowned in that place in Karmi, Basku Abehedya, and his body washed up at Behedya in a different place. Lebasar Tlosyam, after 3 days, Lebasar Tlosyam, the Insa Rav Dimi Menardol is Visra. Rav Dimi from Ardol allowed his wife, permitted his wife to get remarried based on that testimony, even though it was more than 3 days. In other words, his body clearly washed up 3 days later. Vasu, and so it must be that here you see that he's going Lakula. Vasu Ahugava, there was a story of Diglas, a man drowned in the Diglas in the Tigris River. Vasku Agisha the Shabisna, and he washed up, but they found him near the bridge of Shabisna. Visu, and Rava married off his wife, permitted his wife to get married. Based on the testimony of the groomsmen who knew him right before he died. After 5 days. After 5 days, not 3 days. If you say he's going lakula, Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying lakula, he's saying sometimes you get allowed even more than 3 days. So in the Daf Yomi, they went like Yirmiyah. Eliyam l'chumra, if he's going l'chumra and saying that there are times when you don't even have 3 days, right? So in the David Kaman, who are they going like? It was after 3 days, after 5 days? She says, no, could be that's no proof in there at all. Shiny Maya did something. Water is different because water can cause the body to contract, meaning it doesn't bloat up. It doesn't bloat up right away. Yes. So therefore, you can't prove anything from this question. Was Rav Yehuda ben Bava Mekel or Machmer? Rashi to come down the Kame Mina Dam Yama Bas Rav Yehuda Lemeimer Yesh Lana Welcome Osha She'ena Ma'al Paroch L'Shtanas V'Yochel Amen Afil Achim O L'Chomer the Kamer Tanakama Ad Shlosh Yamen Meidin Bas Se'il Lemeimer Ham Afil Tav Shlosh Yam Ein Meidin. So can you prove? You can't prove in this case because this case they were both cases where the guy was in water, and when he was in water, body contracts, it doesn't expand. So wait a minute, Bummer, we just said on Amid Beis before Maya Marzu, right? Maya Marzamaka, that the water irritates the wound. Remember, we said according to Malaz says, no, the body can cauterize and you can't prove anything if there's a wound. Maybe the body will heal and you can't prove. Well, what do you mean? But the Mishnah said that the guy was lowered into the ocean and they picked him up and all that came up was his leg above the knee. He's dead. What do you mean? Maybe it was God says, no, there the water irritates the wound more and he dies for sure. So here you're saying that the water contracts the body and it stays intact. There you said that the water irritates the body. When there was a maka, when there was a cut open wound, all you have is the leg. That means it was cut off. The leg was severed. That's a pretty big wound, right? The leg was severed. Then the water makes it worse. Maybe the salt water irritates it even more. If there's no like the body's totally intact, the guy drowned, the body's intact, then mitzvah summons, then the body contracts and doesn't lose its ID. You could still ID the body even days later. That's only if when the body washed up and the body came out of the water, chazi b'shat, they saw it right away. But if the body stayed there afterwards, it bloats up. In other words, if they could identify the body was in the water intact without a wound, then it might stay even for more than 3 days. Even if you hold that, we can't prove as Rav Yehuda ben Bava being Mekel or being Machmer, because it could very well be that the cases that you're bringing down are cases where it was in water, the body was not wounded in any way, so there was no wound for the water to irritate more, aggravate more. The body stayed intact, and then as soon as the body came out of the water, they identified it because the body was still intact. But if they waited a couple of days afterwards, then the body would begin to bloat, and you couldn't identify it anymore. Now, let's say he fell into water. Can you testify? We're saying over here, can you testify if you saw the guy's face? And if you hold someone as the Raisa, maybe a real good simon would be good too. And according to some, if he was really, if we said if he was being devoured by an animal in a place where a vital organ was, you can say he's dead too, even if you didn't take his pulse. But there was an animal devouring his organs. You can assume that he's dead. And even Maguya also, according to some, says Maguya, you could testify that he's dead. What about if he's just drowned? Guy goes down, can you assume he's dead? Nobody can stay in water, hours and hours. So so here we come to the question, water that has an end, meaning you could see all four sides, like a lake, or you could see all sides, or a swimming pool. So the Mishnah says, Ben Sheish himself, Ben Shein himself, whether it's self, Ishto, so you can't marry off his wife. Maybe you survive. That's Rav Meir Shapiro. Rav Meir holds even water, when you could see the end, you could see all sides. He didn't come out. You saw the guy go down. 2 Adam were there. They saw the guy go down. Never came up. So isn't he dead for sure? Rav Meir says no. Maybe he survived. Rav Meir he fell into a pit of water, a guddle, a big pit. After 3 days, he came out. After 3 days, he came out, and somehow he survived in there. Maybe he found an air pocket or something, or they couldn't see. So Rav Meir says, based on that, you can't assume he's dead. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. We'll see that Rabbi Yossi is a sheet of the Chachamim that we hold. Rabbi Yossi says, Maisa, Besuman is a blind guy, Shiur B'mar. He went down to the mikveh in a cave that had water, and he went down to the mikveh. Yard Moshe Chachrav, his attendant, his escort, his Filipino, whatever, was with him, and he went down afterwards. They waited and waited, they never came out. And their wives were permitted to get remarried based on that, because they stayed there too long in the water. This is water, what we call Sheish Lamsot. They were in a mikveh, they were in a ma'ara, in an ocean. You say maybe the guy swam and you can't see. He went beyond the horizon, you can't see. Maybe he came out the other end. That's Ma'im she'ein lem sof. There's no end. You can't see the end. But Ma'im she'esh lem sof, if it's a lake, a river, or a place that you could see all the sides, all four sides, or a mikveh or a pool of some sort, and they didn't come out, you can rely on that they're dead, even if they never come up. The Shiur Ma'aseh, there's a story. This is the story in age that we talked about before. They lowered him into the ocean. All that came out was his foot. If he was severed above the knee, his wife can get remarried. If it's below the knee, and he fell into the ocean, maybe he survived. He swam away. But if the wound was above the knee, there's no way that he should survive. The water would make it worse, and you could assume he's dead, even though the body was never found. That's what you have. What do you do in cases where they go down in the water? The Dakar, the famous submarine in Israel. It was, I don't know if it took a long time for that because they don't know what happened to it. Maybe it was Ma'im she'ein lem sof. It was in the Mediterranean that the submarine went down, and it took a long time to be matir their wives to get remarried, because maybe they were taken into captivity. Maybe the submarine, they didn't know what happened to the submarine for years. Now we know what happened, but they were declared dead. But maybe the submarine was taken into captivity. We don't know. So it's Ma'im she'ein lem sof. You assume maybe he's alive, unless you have the body, you have his leg came out. Said Meir holds that water, whether it has an end or not, his wife can't get married because you assume maybe he's alive. Disagree. If it has, if you could see all sides and it's like a lake or a pool, then he didn't come out long enough for, nobody can hold their breath that long for hours. Ishto Materis, his wife, is allowed to get remarried. Shein himself, Ishto Asura. If it's no end, like an ocean where it goes on and on, you can't see the end, then his wife cannot get remarried because maybe he came out somewhere else. Maybe he washed up ashore, he swam ashore at the other end. What's Ma'im she'esh himself? If you stand at the edge and you can see all four sides. But if you can't see all four sides, that's Ma'im she'ein himself. It's like the Mediterranean goes out to the Atlantic and you can't see. Maybe he swam and got ashore somewhere else. Tells a story. A man drowned in that swamp called Simki. Rav Shila married off his wife. Rav said to Shmuel, that's Ma'im she'esh lem sof. You could see all the sides. How did he allow his wife to get remarried? Let's put this Rav Shila in Chayrim. So Shmuel said to him, Nishlach le Bereisha. Let's ask him first. Let's give him a hearing, a shamua, due process, a shimua. You give him a hearing first to see. Let's ask him. Shofar, they ask him, Ma'im she'ein lem sof, Ishto Asura. Oh, if Ma'im that she'ein lem sof, a water that has no end, is his wife Asur or Mutter? Shalach lehu Ishto Asura. His wife is also, if it's ein lem sof, she can't get remarried. The Agma, the Simki, Ma'im she'esh lem sof or Ma'im she'ein lem sof. That the swamp over there, does it have end or not? Shalach lehu Ma'im she'ein lem sof. He says it's Ma'im she'ein lem sof. That wasn't just a little swamp, a little pool, the same soap. So Amar my time Rafi. So why did you allow her to get remarried? It was Mayim She'ein Lehem Sof. Maybe the guy, maybe it seems he drowned here, but maybe he got up somewhere else. So he says, Mitatin, I made a mistake. Anasach, said, keeping the kavu, the kaime, since the water is gathered and it's stationary, Kamayim Sheish Lehem Sof, it's Mayim Sheish. In other words, even though you couldn't see the end, but it was stationary water like a lake. I thought it's like Mayim Sheish Lehem Sof, and he didn't come out, so I had cleared him dead. Lo, it's not the case. Keeping the Ikad Goli, since there's sometimes waves, Eimer Goli Ashbalo, maybe the waves pushed him and took him away. L'makam racham pushed him away, and maybe he did come out. So I made a mistake when I allowed his wife to get remarried. So Kari Shmuel laid to Rav. Shmuel said about Rav, Lo Yilot Tzaddik Koloven. Nothing bad will befall at Tzaddik. And as Rav wanted to put him in Chayim, Rav says Shmuel, let's put him in Chayim. Shmuel says, let's wait. Let's give him a hearing. So Shmuel says, you see, because of this, in other words, he admitted that he made a mistake. It wasn't like he went against the rabbis and said, Ma'im she'ein lehem sof, I'm going to marry his water off. I made a mistake. I thought it's like Ma'im she'esh lehem sof. It turns out it's really Ma'im she'ein lehem sof. So Shmuel said about Rav, no bad thing will happen. You wanted to put him in Chayir and nothing bad happened because you're a tzaddik. And Kari Rav led to Shmuel, Ushua Barov Yovis. And Rav then complimented Shmuel and said, you see, the salvation will be with many counselors. In other words, because you counseled me and you said, wait, let's give him a hearing first. That saved us from putting him in Chayrim. In other words, interesting that this Rav Shila made a mistake, but he admitted he made a mistake. He didn't put him in Chayrim when he went against the rabbis. Here he admitted, yes, Ma'im she'ein lehem sof, you can't marry her off because maybe he came up somewhere else. I made a mistake. I thought this is like Ma'im she'esh lehem sof. I thought it's like a lake or a pool because he didn't come out and the water's stationary, but sometimes the water moves along because it is Ma'im she'ein lehem sof. It doesn't have an end to it. And therefore, I shouldn't have allowed his wife to get remarried. It doesn't say if she actually married off or not. He says he allowed her. Maybe he was also Zocha. He says, Insava Rav Shila, he permitted her to get married, and maybe just simply made a mistake. All right, we'll pick him here tomorrow, Hashem, from Tanya. Have a good day, everybody.
Yes, good.